I think we're going to get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining. You are in where we are, where we've been, and where we are going.
Sorry, I lost my screen,
That's
of
okay.
course, at the
OER
last
research.
moment.
I just
Yeah.
wanted to remind everyone in the here in the room and virtually that we are observing the code of conduct. So if you'd like to take a look at that, you can find it on the conference website. And without further ado, I'm going to let our attendees step in.
Thank you, Lindsay. We're also attendees. So we're attendees and presenters today. Really glad that you're all here for multiple reasons. We're excited to sort of do a bit of a reveal, and in the spirit of open, we're going to give you something today. So that you can take away and hopefully find a lot of value in. So we have a larger grant that we're working on right now that's looking at student success outcomes. I guess I should introduce myself first. Who is that participant in this conference? He could have just came up. I'm Eddie Watson. I'm the Vice President for Digital Innovation at AAC&U, and this is my colleague and collaborator, Heather Miceli, who's a postdoc on this particular grant that we're going to be sharing some of the results from. So yes, so this grant is an extension of a project and some work that I led when I was at the University of Georgia, a research project about 7 years ago that looked at student success outcomes, student metrics, student success metrics. And so rather than just one institution with 22,000 students, which sounds exciting, we're actually looking at a whole cluster of institutions with probably north of 2 million students represented within that data set. So we're really excited to share those results with you when we have them. We haven't got there yet. So a little side project that's part of this grant is that we also are in the process of developing an OER research database that is free and open and entirely searchable with its own research methodology. So that's what we're here to share with you today, is that research methodology, the project as we have just opened it up to everyone. And I'll be bringing a handout around with a web address and some other details, but we're going to walk you through what we've developed. So at this point, I'll just turn it over. Is it you or Jess next? Okay, Jessica Chittum, which is the third speaker that I didn't mention because she's not in the room with us. But Jessica, could you introduce yourself as you get started? Thank you. Apologies.
Sure, and hopefully everybody can see the slides now. Is that a thumbs up?
We can, Jess.
Okay, thank you. I don't know what happened. I clicked on an empty screen and we lost the slides, but we're back. I am Jessica Chittum, Director of Assessment and Pedagogical Innovation at AAC&U with Eddie and Heather, and we're going to talk about this project today. This unfortunately was Eddie's slide that he was just speaking about. What are we going to give you today? Well, access to an OER research database that we've been working on for the past year is one of those things. And we hope that this will be a very useful tool for you. So let's talk a little bit about what this is and why we've been working on it. The OER research database is a collection of all of the formal publications that we could locate that focus on OER and or OEP, so open educational resources and or open educational practices. We then engaged in some pretty in-depth qualitative coding to really better understand the landscape of the literature that's there. We did this so that we could seek answers related to the grant project that Eddie was just describing, as well as what's missing, what it does well, etc. Just in general, looking at the landscape of the literature that's there. We're sharing it with you so that you can benefit from this work. We're doing all of this work. Why not give you access to it? This is an open conference after all. And this is actually modeled after a similar site. You'll have access to these slides later and can go and look at that site at a later time. But this work started about 12 years ago when we were looking similarly at e-portfolios as a tool in higher education, similar qualitative coding, et cetera. And it was part of the work that helped lead up to e-portfolios being recognized as a high impact practice. If you want to go and check that out, the link will be here in the slides when you have them.
So in order to start this endeavor, we needed a rationale, and our rationale was that we had questions about what is actually out in the literature ourselves. So we really wanted to know whether or not OER has positive influences in outcomes on students, faculty, and others in institutions. This is really the focus of our research in this Hewlett grant, especially the student outcomes piece. And we wanted to know what evidence is out there about OER and OEP. And what do we actually know about how OER impacts those student outcomes? Are they positive? Are they negative? Is there no change? But we know that there's some reviews of the literature that are a little bit dated at this point, and there's been a robust amount of OER research that's been done since those reviews were published. And so we decided to dive into the literature ourselves, but figured if we're doing it, we might as well share it with everyone else. And so we know that so much of the argument about OEP is this tip of the iceberg. You know, we talk about affordability, we talk about cost savings, we talk about the theory about using OER and why we think it would be positive for our students. We talk a lot about perceptions, student perceptions, instructor opinions about using OER, challenges to using OER, barriers. But also we have a ton of anecdotal descriptions of using OER. But what we really, really want to get at here with this grant is the base of the iceberg, you know, really understanding the impact on student success and achievement outcomes. Is OER an actionable strategy for increasing student success in our classrooms, at our institutions? And we want to know if there's research designs that clearly show that impact. And so obviously that's one of the goals of our work, but we want to see what else has been done out there, and this has been part of that.
So next we'll talk a little bit about, or a lot a bit about, the research behind this search engine, as it were. Given all of those reasons that Heather talked about, we decided to just dive right in and gather all of the publications that we could possibly locate, access, and read. Noted in English because neither of us can read in another language, and that are focused on OER and or OEP. We searched high and low, institutional library databases, of course, Google Scholar. We looked at specific journals that focus on this area, such as Open Praxis or iRoddle. I always get the pronunciation of that acronym wrong. Websites of larger OER initiatives. For instance, the Midwestern Higher Education Compact has a ton of publications from their team on that site. References sections from key publications, that sort of thing. And what we ended up with so far is over 1,000 publications. I think today we had 1,058. They span the years 2001 to our current year, 2024. We did not include every possible thing on the internet that mentioned OER. We were selective, so we have some selection criteria. First, it needed to be a formal publication, as you can see here. And the main focus of it must be on open educational resources and or open educational practices. We did not include those that are focused only on MOOCs. I'll probably shoot that one over to Heather when I get through this slide to explain very specifically why not. We had conversations and we decided not to include publications focused on MOOCs. The formal publication types would be things like reports, journal articles, magazines and newspaper articles, thesis, dissertation, books, book chapters, legal documents. We found some policy documents, for instance, published conference proceedings, and even data sets. I think we have a few web pages that are particularly relevant to the field as well. What we excluded would be less formal publications like conference presentations or blog posts. And Heather, you can take the shot at the MOOCs point.
Yeah, so we did start looking at MOOC literature, there's a lot of it. But we also were reading them and feeling like it really wasn't getting at the point that we were trying to get at, where looking at open educational resources in classroom settings, MOOCs are very much informal learning. We do have some sources about open courseware and open universities where those materials are brought into classrooms and used. So we tried to keep the focus on what is being used in classrooms. This is an international data. We are focusing on sources internationally. So we are trying to keep it to a little bit more formal education than a MOOC where somebody could just sign up and take a course. And the outcome is how many students finish the course versus not finish the course.
Okay. Qualitative coding, and then we'll go back to Heather again. Here's a quick breakdown of how we qualitatively coded these 1,058 publications. First, we started with a sample of 116 publications that were coded by 2 researchers. That would be me and Heather. We landed on that sample. We didn't know how many were going to end up in this database over time. However, we landed on that because that prior work that I mentioned earlier about e-portfolios had a sample size of about that many. It was right around 100 that we started with when we began the qualitative coding. We used a priori codes or deductive coding for categories and subgroups that were based on prior research and theory, and then inductive coding for the themes. In the end, for those 116 publications, we had 80% inter-rater reliability. I believe that our inter-rater reliability is much higher now, though we haven't tested it in a little while. Back then, we each coded the same 116, didn't look at one another's codes, and then compared. Now we have a pretty good handle on the coding schemes, so I'm pretty sure that the inter-rater reliability would have increased over time. This is how it goes. We have categories at the top of the pyramid here. Basically, what's the focus of the publication within open education broadly? Publications could be categorized as one or both of these. Then we have our subgroups. They describe the type of publication, ranging from descriptive to empirical research, for instance. Publications can be placed in multiple empirical groups. There are a few, we'll get into that in a minute, but in terms of the other 4 subgroups, they can only be in one. Then we have the themes that are the main topics discussed in the publication, and these are the primary themes that we saw consistently appear throughout this literature base. It has to be a focus of the publication, not just mentioned in passing, and they can be tagged, publications can be tagged with multiple themes.
So to start with, we started with 2 categories and pretty basic 2 categories, OER and OEP. We thought this was a pretty important designation to make at the beginning because there are many people that just focus on OER, and there are some people that just focus on OEP, and there are some people that meet in the middle and do both. So both of these categories, an article or a publication can be classified as either OER or OEP, or it can be classified as both. And Jess, if you go to the next slide, you can see the percentage of these categories in our database. And unsurprisingly, OER makes up the largest percentage of that at 86.7%. But there is a decent showing for OEP in there as well at 8%. And then there are many that are also classified as OER and OEP at 5.3%.
Right. So next, the 7 subgroups. This is that second level down the pyramid. We have these 7 subgroups. And as I mentioned before, a publication can only be tagged with 4 of them alone, or if it's an empirical category. I'm sorry, I don't know why that's happening. I'm going to use a different mouse. The empirical outcomes, empirical affective, and empirical assessment and evaluation. Sometimes studies have multiple focuses. They collect different types of data. So only when it comes to these empirical subgroups can you tag more than one. Let's talk about each one quickly. For the descriptive subgroup, this is as it seems, and a descriptive argument only. Very importantly here, there are no original data presented or analyzed in these publications. Usually they're an argument for the use of OER. They might make theoretical arguments, present data from other findings, but don't have the original data that we're looking for in empirical categories. They could present examples of OER initiatives and use, for example, but they are descriptive and don't present data. We also have some guides out there that we've found a number of, how-to guides with implementing OER or OEP. So there are a few examples listed here. OER initiatives or implementations are quite a number of those. Examples of OER, anecdotal do's and don'ts, theoretical or anecdotal arguments for the use of OER. So for the subgroups, 2 through 4, those are our empirical categories. I pointed those out earlier. Let's talk about each one individually and keeping in mind that we can tag more than one of these 3. So for empirical outcomes, we are presenting original data. That is the essence of the empirical category. Original data are presented and analyzed. They can be qualitative or quantitative on relevant outcomes. Outcomes can be a wide array of constructs and data points like cost savings or textbook costs, learning or achievement or success related outcomes like course completion or number of semesters to degree completion, dropout rates. So that's more than just a grade or a test score or something like that. And many other measured constructs, instructor outcomes, DI-related outcomes. There are those out there that focus on clicks when measuring engagement, for instance, motivation-related constructs, that sort of thing. It can also include research on evidence-based pedagogical practices that focus on improving the efficacy of OER, how it's implemented, the quality of the OER, those sorts of things. So those are more pedagogical in nature. I think I already described all of that. I'm going to move on to empirical affective.
Hey, Jess.
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, but we
Nope.
did get the 10 minutes about 3 minutes ago. So I don't know if you want to like speed through these. So we can get to the
okay.
good
Yes.
stuff.
Thank you. Again, presenting original data, quantitative or qualitative, looking at opinions, thoughts, feelings. So less of the objective outcomes and more focus on what do you think of this? What's your perception of this or your opinion about this? And then we have assessment and evaluation where we're looking at any type of original data that focuses on maybe some type of assessment like an OER assessment or a program evaluation, needs assessments, those sorts of things. Tests of rubrics or tools for OER. Here we go. Now we're out of the empirical categories and we are into policy and legal documents. And these are quite literally legal documents. We have found a few of those and we anticipate finding more, especially over time. Data files are, as it sounds, data files. They're data sets. So there's none of the analysis typically. It's just here is a data set that we have published and made open. And then edited books. We created this subgroup actually fairly recently because we found a number of edited books. We code every separate chapter with its own subgroup and its own themes. And so as not to replicate, different codes because we are doing research on this, we just have an edited book category. That's pretty much, it's an edited book and that's all we're saying about it because we have coded every individual chapter as well. Back to Heather.
Yep. And so the themes, so this is the third level of coding. This is the inductive coding that we pulled as we were coding our original 116. We developed these themes. You can see we have quite a few. Some of the more common ones are student outcomes, faculty outcomes, affordability and financial. But I'm not going to go through all of them because we want to keep moving. And so the prevalence of the subgroups in the database, we're really interested in obviously how much descriptive research is out there and how much empirical research is out there. And as you can see, it's quite even with the sample that we have currently. Jess, if you want to go to the next slide.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, too far. And this is all of the subgroups in the database. You can see descriptive is the highest at 521, making up actually about half of the database. And then empirical effective is the next larger category along with empirical outcomes. And you can see the other ones are quite small so far in our sample. But what this allows us to do is to dive into a particular subgroup and look at the themes within. And so you can see here, we're looking at the empirical outcomes. We're very interested in student outcomes. And so what outcomes research is out there, you can see student outcomes is pretty prevalent. It makes up, I think is on the next slide. And Jess is actually going to dive into that student outcomes category, that student outcomes theme a little bit deeper.
All right, so we are clearly interested in this because that's kind of the point of the grant work that we've been working on. One of our primary research questions is about the impact on student outcomes specifically. So student outcomes represents about 6.7% of the total publications. So out of those 1,058 publications, we have about 6.7% that focus in on student outcomes. Then really, of those 71, just 49 focus on outcomes related to student success or achievement. So that's 4.6% of the total publications in this database so far. Of those 49, 24 represent larger scale studies and 26 represent smaller scale studies. We're happy to explain the difference between larger and smaller if you would like to ask a question at some point, but that is what it is for now. And here's the good part, right? Let's actually look at this database and see what we've provided for you open access. Heather and I will both talk about this, but because I'm in charge of the navigation, I'm going to start talking. So I'm going to escape, excuse me, and get to the link. I had this all pulled up earlier. I apologize, but when things crashed, everything went away. Here we go. This is the website. We have a quick overview of the project on this first page. So take a look at this Hewlett Foundation funded project, what our main objectives are, learn a little bit about what we're doing and how this database came to be. I've already explained the types of publications, so I won't go through this information, but you can learn a little bit about the project overall on this page. We also have the research behind the database. So that breakdown that we gave you related to the different qualitative codes, you can read a little bit more about each of those here on this page. The themes, we've just listed them. We haven't provided definitions because they're fairly self-explanatory, but don't hesitate to email one of us if you're curious at any point. All right, and then here is the best part of it. It's going to take a little bit to load. There we go. We have an advanced search for all of the publications that we have found and coded. So you can see the themes down here at the bottom. You can also search specifically. Well, I'm interested in OER. I really want to look at outcomes focused research. And in that outcomes focused research, I'm particularly interested in student outcomes and student perceptions. So now I've narrowed it down to just that type of work. So think about how useful this might be if you are, for instance, making a case on your campus about why you should be using OER. There are themes even focused on initiatives specifically. If you want to see descriptions of initiatives while you're developing an OER initiative on your campus, for example. And very, very important is if you find something that's missing, let us know.
That
We are
comment.
also crowdsourcing.
Oh, yeah. If you didn't catch that, there is a submit missing publication. So if you publish something and you're not in our database, please feel free to add yourself to our database so we can code it. And I believe that is all. And it's lunchtime, so I think we could take a question or two.
I will share one thing. Back in March, whenever we began this part of the development, the goal was, hey, at Open Ed, we want to have 1,000 citations in the database. And so we just made it across that deadline and it's working. There are a lot more to come. So every week when you go to this, you're going to see, oh, now it's 1,100, now it's 1,300. So you can anticipate this growing significantly over the next 6 months. And then we think we've got kind of, well, the end of the grant is the finish line, right? But we do have a commitment of resources at AAC&U to continue to develop and code the database years into the future. So this isn't a project that's going to decay or languish at the end of the grant. This is going to have ongoing development support. Okay, so I'll let folks ask questions now. There we go. Try it harder.
Thank you so much. This is really exciting. This is Anita Walls from Virginia Tech. I'm wondering if you plan to look at the search logs to find out what people are looking for as a way to maybe add some more
That's a
things.
really good idea.
Yes, you get money to do that for
Jess, that seems like a really good idea.
We should take that to our tech people who helped build the foundation from which we can share all of this research with you. We're going to talk to them pretty soon, so we should add that to the list. See if that's possible.
I like it.
I just want to mention that I laughed a little bit at I wish this was done when I was working on my dissertation. One of the things that I've said historically since the other database on ePortfolios was first published is, hey, if you need to write a dissertation on ePortfolios, go here and you'll find exactly what's missing, and then you'll have your entire literature review for you right in front of your face. So sorry about that. We did it as fast as we could.
I have one question online.
Oh.
What did you find out about faculty outcomes?
We have not had the opportunity to dive deeply into faculty outcomes as of yet. We are
focused
still
on
very
student.
Yeah, we definitely focus on student because that is the focus of our research. But we hope to be able to dive into all of these different categories and see what's going on in there.
It is a work in progress.
Yes.
I would also echo, this is great. I wish it was available when I started my doctorate in open pedagogy, but that ship has sailed. One of the things, I appreciate that you have your approach to how you conducted your research on the project site. I'm wondering if you could speak a little to so when looking at the parameters by which you defined quality and by which you defined what is acceptable to include in the database, because this is intended to be an international resource, I wonder if you could discuss a little bit how you took into account the inherent biases of the research team, what you did to ensure that this was not, impacted by the weird phenomenon in scholarly research, and just more that you did to take that into consideration.
Jess, do you want to take that one?
So when you're engaging in any type of research, you have to have your selection criteria. And as you can imagine, there is a lot out there in terms of chatter around open educational resources. And the premise of this work as a whole, if we're looking at everything that we're doing as part of this Hewlett grant, we are more concerned about the more formal publication types, because those publications are going to give us the information and the data that we're looking for to design our research study, as well as understand the landscape of more formal literature. So we had to make some hard decisions and say, you know, there are a lot of blogs out there, but blogs are not very formal. They can go in and change what's in the blog later, those sorts of things. We need to just set that one aside and focus instead on something that's more formal. And also thinking about what we're actually able to do. If we were to put every abstract from every conference presentation that is online, we would have not a lot of information about what happened in that study or session, because many conferences are just abstracts, not always accompanied by a paper that is accessible. And you know, we need that information in order to code it. So we would have a lot that would have to be put in, but not as much of those presentations, for example, would have enough information for us to provide the codes that we need to. Just coding every manuscript isn't just a reading of the abstract. I typically read the abstract and then immediately go to, for instance, for something empirical, the methods section, and make sure that we understand exactly how they were researching this, what outcomes they were using, those sorts of things. So we are doing a pretty decent scan for all of these publications as well. I hope that answers your question.
Well, I think it's as good as you can answer that question. I mean, it's like doing any research. I mean, you set your selection criteria and send in your checks and do your inter-rater liability. You know, it's not, you know, it's not, you're not machine. So it's not, it's a scientific approach, but it's not, you know, hard science. I just simply wanted to first thank the folks at AAC and you. This is a significant addition to the OER scholarship that we've been needing badly to be able to move this work beyond simply looking at cost savings. This really takes it to that next level to say, so really kudos to you all for doing this.
Thank you.
Although thinking about the coding, I was sitting there thinking, who's all that coding? Oh my God.
It's me.
Is it you? Oh my God.
And then Jess checks it.
I did a qualification. I know about the coding. Like, man, I don't even want to undertake that. And I guess I should also say kudos to Hewlett Foundation for once again
Yes.
supporting this great work. Supporting that, we realized you were there. This great work in the OER space. I don't know where we'd all would be without Hewlett continue to, you know, I can how these presentations have gone in and, oh yes, this is a Hewlett funded work. Thank God for Hewlett.
Yep. Yep. Right there with you. We are so
I'm
thankful.
And I can't wait to get online and go and look in here and see what you got. There's some good stuff here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for those kind words.
Thank you.